sticking.
So, welcome to the launch of From Gay to Z. Very happy to have Justin Sayre and Shane at the Bureau, two people we have known from early on in the Bureau's life, which began in 2012 at Strange Loop Gallery on Orchard Street. Yes, and we had the pleasure of meeting these two pretty shortly thereafter. And one thing that we're thrilled about that Justin did was to organize this amazing event at the Pyramid Club back in the summer of 2013. We asked Justin to help us do a fundraiser, and it was amazing. Like, Shane performed, Justin did Bond, yes, a million people. It was just like everybody. And Arcade was there. It was a lot of fun. So we are eternally grateful to you for that. And we're so thrilled that you have this book out. Woo-hoo! And now I want to hear you both talk about it.
Oh, good.
So do it. Welcome.
Right. Yay!
Justin, how are you feeling, babe?
Oh, fine.
Tell the truth.
I get very nervous at things like this because you have no idea how much comfort I've taken at proscenium.
Oh, is there anything we can do in the meantime?
I don't know. This is why I'm trying to box myself in to be like, I'm on a stay. Like, you know,
well, next time we can take some of those cardboard boxes and at least
just build a little fort for me. Just peek out and be so happy.
Thank you for being vulnerable with
Oh,
us.
we're not there yet, but try.
This is your fourth book, is
My
that right?
fourth book.
The other ones being Husky, Pretty, and Mean,
Husky, Pretty, and Mean,
which was the original title of TLC's second album.
That's right. That's right.
And this is your first book, not as like a young adult fictional trilogy, and also your first nonfiction book.
My first nonfiction book, yes.
Can you tell us the origin story? Tell us how this book came to be under my torso.
All right. Well, so I used to do a show called The Meeting at Joe's Pub Downtown.
Yes.
Would put out videos online of the show, and I would always get these emails and texts from young people like, you know so much about gay culture, how can I find out about it? I was like, girl, it's a lot of lonely nights. Like, don't worry, just go live, you know, like, go be gay rather than just read about it like me. But I thought, all right, so I came up with this idea to do a show called The Gay BCs, and we also did that at Joe's Pub, and we kind of got through halfway through the show, and I had done it in New York, and then I did it in LA, and when I was in LA, Michael, who ended up being one of the editors on the book, talked to me and said, would you want to turn this into a book? Like, have a full book? And I thought, well, that kind of completes the purpose of this, and I can have this book that I can say, oh, well, you should go read my book next time some young gay person says, I don't know enough about gay culture. So that was, God, it's years ago. I don't know how many, probably 3. And that began the process of writing this.
So what were the challenges of adapting something you were, because KBCs was sort of a casual,
yes,
you're on stage,
yeah,
and just sort of, you know, it doesn't have to be like,
no,
it doesn't even have to be alphabetical if you're on stage.
No,
really.
no. I think Lady Gaga's entry on stage was not for me, and then I moved on. Like, you know, I couldn't do that.
Same. And so what was like the process like? Were you intimidated or excited, or like what was the process like adapting it from like a live stage thing into a book?
It was absolutely intimidating. I lived in fear for 3 years. And I wish I was kind of kidding, but I really wasn't, because I saw how, I think what it was the great lesson that I had pretended I'd learned for so long, of when you're a marginalized artist, you believe that there's only so many chances and that you only have so many opportunities to talk about things, so you have to get it right. And I took that totally on this book. I was petrified that I was going to leave somebody out, and then it would be pandemonium, and it would be people calling me out on Twitter saying that I had failed. I mean, I just went down a rabbit hole all the time. And I don't know that that's totally unreasonable. I mean, you see so many people who are like, oh, well, you did this and now you're, burn her, she's a witch. I really felt, come on in. We're just sitting down. Yeah, I've been rejected before. I really took that on, and it just made turning the drafts in always a panic, and always it isn't good enough, and it isn't right, and all these things, and it was also, I think we were also trying to figure out the expectations of the book. Chronicle got the first half of the book from me. I was like, holy fuck, how long is this thing gonna be? Like they had to find new paper to print it, because the quality of if to print this book on the pages they had originally tried to, it would have been too thick, and it would have cost a fortune. So they had to go and resource new paper to actually have it done. So it was always nerve-wracking.
How did you come on the other end of it? Or did you?
I decided to open the book with an apology and to kind of head it off and say, like, this is not a tome. This is not the definitive. There's no way that could happen, because there's things that are coming out all the time. There's new people and new stories that we should add to the canon rather than throw out. And this is a snapshot of time, and this is a snapshot of time from a specific viewpoint. And that's the best I can do.
So with that in mind, how much research were you doing for this book versus I was reading it and I'm like, how many of these are just you elucidating about? I mean, there are things I've never heard. I consider myself pretty on top of my gay history. And I was like, Arbette, I've never heard of it.
Oh yeah.
Lady Java, I've never heard of it. How much of this was things that you had known and were just elaborating on, and how much were things that you were specifically researching for this book?
I'm gonna say I made the list for this book in 2 nights, and was just like, oh, okay, this is who.
And you stuck to that list, more or less?
Yes, people got cut from that list.
Who?
I mean, it was just certain things I was like, all right. It was a lot of decision making, this is terrible, but Perez Hilton. I was like, he's part of the conversation, but he's also an asshole. So why do it? Because I wanted the book to be really positive. My agent said, what about Caitlyn Jenner? And I was like, fuck no, no.
Good call.
So it was a lot of that, but then it was also I wanted to put Nanette in, who was a drag queen from New York in the 50s, 60s, and the early 70s. And she'd been part of Charles Ludlam's work. But then it was okay, well, then we don't get people who are making work now. And then then the book kind of looks like it's all looking backward. And I wanted it to be these are still people who are part of the conversation now. This is not something that's dead. So I think there's a lot of conversations right now about gay culture being dead. And it's well, no, we're trying to recalibrate, because now we have a much larger canvas to make work on than we've ever had before. And what does that mean? And also right now we're getting credit for work that we've done, and work that is ours in ways that we've never gotten credit before. So what does that mean? And I think it's really exciting. I also think it's about to all go away in a heartbeat. But that's my,
Well, you had my favorite gay apocalyptic line, which was, they're coming for us and they're gonna put us in the camps and it won't be fun, but it'll be a little fun.
Just at first, it'll be fun. We'll be it's kind of, we're still here. That's what's gonna happen.
So I read this book straight through, which is the way I can imagine that it's not normally going to be.
No, I would imagine.
How do you want people to use this book? Because for those of you who don't own it yet, it's magnificent. and it's alphabetical and it's breezy and it's sort of it's done alphabetically, which means that you're jumping from time frames, and it's very heavy on theater history and camp, which was a delight because I don't know shit about theater history. How do you envision people use this book, or how do you want people to use this book?
Well, I think it's a great kind of coffee table book, in the sense that, you can, if you're at somebody's house, you can, I wonder what's in this, and like pop it open and kind of find out something you didn't know, perhaps. I think it's a great toilet book, which I didn't ever think I'd write a book for the toilet, but here we are. And I even personally, I find myself like, that is a good. I wonder what's going on, and I wrote it. So I think it's a great toilet book. Fire Island. To buy them for everybody's house. Every day. Really. I think it's a great douching book. You're sitting there waiting for the waters to run, and you're like, I don't know enough about it. So yeah, I think it's kind of like short and sweet. You get in and get out.
That's all of
That's right. That's right.
Because I will. So tell me a little bit about the editing process, because one thing So I think it's when I was reading this, I was like, some of these entries are impossibly short. Like, I don't know how you got them so short because you want to go on.
Yeah.
You've also written a book where Jerry Herman is 2 entries away from HIV, where I'm just like, how do you decide what to put in, what not to put in? Like, how did you approach the editing process?
Well, at a certain point, my neuroses had gotten so bad that they called in like a diversity expert.
Who was it?
I don't remember. But she had crazy ideas.
And like what?
Well, she gave me a list of people that she thought should be covered in the book that were not then covered in the book. And most of them I was like, yeah, that's fair. And made the adjustment. But she also like left out people. Like there was no safety at all. Like I thought, finally I'd get the approval of a diversity specialist. And and then we went back through and I was like, where's the Christine Jorgensen entry? And it was like, oh, nobody remembered that. I was like, oh my God, I'll be killed. So there was no kind of safety. And what a lot of it was my trying to be as diligent as possible. And I got it wrong. I don't mean to say that to be like, I didn't, but like there are people in the book that should be in the book, and there are conversations that should be in the book, and I don't say that to kind of be like, the book isn't good, because I think the book is good, and I think the book is really necessary. But I think that the book is I started, my attitude towards the book changed because I thought, this is a gift to say like, here you go, here's a beginning of a conversation, rather than here's the whole thing, and that kind of released some of that for me, because I went through and I was looking at like, what movies do you include when you get into works of art? What books are really important? What Tchaikovsky's The Pathétique. For years was like a secret coded, like if you played it at a party. This I love about like old school homosexuality. If you played The Pathétique by Tchaikovsky at a party, everybody was like, this is the gay hour. Like first of all, that you would have enough people who are musically literate to know, they're playing the Pathétique by Tchaikovsky. Ooh. But also that signal to be gay, like, it's insanity. And I thought, that's interesting to me. Is that interesting to everybody?
Well, not
everybody. Not I care about. That's right.
So besides popular villains like Brett Skelton,
sure.
Are there people that you left out that you were like, maybe I should include them next time? Or are there people on the cutting room floor that you're like, vice versa? Basically, are there people included that you were like, maybe I should have cut? Are there people who not really should be there?
I think there are. I think there's people like, like I said to you before, I said, like, I think Tig Notaro should be in the book. I think they're a very important part of the community. I think that the Pixies should be in the book, and it was just kind of a spacing issue. I think there's a lot of drag queens that are are important in their cities
Mhm.
that are not as well known in perhaps New York that I feel like should have been in the book.
Mhm.
But then it was like, well, are you just doing a book about drag? Are you just doing a book about, like, what's the whole breadth of it? You know, there were porn stars that I thought were interesting and I wanted to put in because I thought they were part of the conversation about gayness at a certain point.
Mhm.
But then there were also people who I felt like had never been in a book like this, like Vaginal Davis. That was a huge thing I was like, Vaginal Davis is part of queer culture. In fact, she's been an arbiter of queer culture for a long time. You know, Genesis Porridge is another one, huge person to put in a book, who's not in these anthologies. Annie Sprinkle is not in these anthologies and should be. So, you know, do I think I got it completely right? No, but I think I got really close. And I think it's a great jumping off point for anybody that's interested in what gay culture is.
So 2 questions about some people you included.
Yes.
How did you deal, first of all, with people that you know and work with, you know, like Daniel Franzese and
Yes.
people like that? And,
Yes.
There's friends of yours in this book. Nathan LeGrand.
Yeah.
How did you approach that?
Well, I think it was always a level of like, do they make work that deals with queerness?
Mhm.
And talks about queerness in a real way, because I felt like that was part of the discussion. Like we had a debate when the book was going out because they wanted to talk about Lee, what's his name? I want to say Lee Grant.
Lee Pace?
Lee Pace.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, he's gay, but like he doesn't talk about it ever.
Mhm.
And we just lust after him. Like what part of the conversation is that? You know, where you look at somebody like Jim Parsons, who was a huge popular person in like across America and had the most popular sitcom for years, but also like in all his side work and even his production company was producing gay stories, was in The Normal Heart, like really was trying to be part of the conversation about gayness and queerness. I thought that was more important. But then there was a lot of like, it was like an eeny, meeny, miny, mo situation, you know, like, do you only put, you know, like, somebody asked why Marlon Brando was in the book. Because Marlon Brando is kind of like, has since kind of been outed as a bisexual. And I was like, well, since, yes, but, you know, and he kind of admitted it towards the end of his life. We don't know how much there's that kind of gray area. And I was like, I don't know, where I would rather perhaps spend the time on people that, you know, like another person, Kate Clinton. I don't think enough people talk about Kate Clinton. What an impact she had as a comedian, as an out lesbian before Ellen, you know? Those are people that are important and don't get talked about enough. So I kind of felt like this was the time to do that. But it was also, like I said before, and you know, it was also like a personal preference thing. I think you could argue that the Kardashians, in a weird way, are part of queer culture because so many queer kids grow up watching them, and that's their current look at glamour. So, and it pains me to say it, but like Kim Kardashian's like a Joan Crawford for some kid now. That's horrible. Like that hurts more than anything. But that's just the truth. But I wasn't gonna spend time about the Kardashians. I wasn't gonna do that to myself. But also like Real Housewives, that's a huge part. Like everybody talks about, you know, that's part of it. I think when it came to writing about my friends and writing about anybody in general, this was a book of flattery. This was a book of like, look at all these great people, rather than like, this bitch owes me money.
Well, along those lines, I've had the great pleasure of knowing you for a long time.
Sure.
There were several entries where I was like, Well, she's being very diplomatic.
Yes.
So was that the sort of, it sounds like the guiding principle you said in terms of like who you're choosing to include and how you're talking about them is you wanted it to be like effervescent, positive.
Absolutely.
Is that how you decided when to hold your tongue? And
yes.
You get a little, come on.
Of course. Yeah, like a joke, but not like, oh, you're terrible.
But is that how you decided where to editorialize and where to leave?
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of one of the reasons I didn't feel like I could do Paris Hilton well, because I couldn't hold back. I would just be like an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody who really didn't do a lot of nice things for a long time and was really cruel. And now is, you know, that's all coming home to roost, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I really I wanted it to be positive. I wanted it to be very complimentary. And it is, and perhaps maybe a little bit more so than if we were just sitting around shooting the shit and being like, well, her. That'll be the follow-up. Well, her. And I'll tell you the truth of how I feel about it. Well, something put a footnote. Yeah, this bitch. But I think the thing that I realized, and when it kind of goes back to your first question of the difference between doing it on stage and doing a book, is like, I know on stage, I'm gonna say it in a way that's like, oh, that funny little whatever. And there's a leeway that I could have with an audience to be like, I don't really care for her, but this is what I think. I knew that was not going to be possible in this book. And rather than kind of having people like, oh God, look at what terrible things were written about me. I just kind of wanted to laud as many people and talk about their accomplishments.
I just have a couple more questions.
Please ask them all.
Twist your arm into reading something that I want you to read from the book, and then you can read whatever you want. Sure. So, like, I'm curious what your relationship is to lists in general. I'm one of these people where, like, so there's two things. First of all, I feel like, is there a queer urge to, like, decide who is on and off of a list? I feel like there is.
Yeah.
Secondly, perhaps I'm projecting, I feel like personally attacked by the Out 100 every year.
I second that motion.
I'm just like, what a stupid list, and why aren't I on it?
Oh, without doubt. I think we've had this argument together.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
so did any of that come, do you have residual trauma that you're working through with fantasy? Or was this part of like a larger project that you always have of like, this person's camp, this person isn't, this girl's got it, this girl doesn't? I don't know, like, what's your relationship to gay lists? This is a roundabout, we'll answer, I swear. I kind of educated myself in like an anti-meme kind of way, you know, where it's like, oh, I didn't understand that, or I didn't know who that person was, so I would write lists, and still do. I was just reading a book on Voltaire, and in the book, they cited that I just think this is so fucking funny. In the 1700s, there was a special prison that you went to in France for homosexuality. It was like, fag jail? What? It's my next musical. I think it's unbelievable. Like, fag jail? Just a fag jail. I love that. I love it. So, like, I always do that. I will always write things down. And when you die, they're just gonna find a book. Oh, fag jail. My notes. Yeah. Oh my God, what happened here? So I have that. I don't tend to. As a person, always want the room open as possible. Meaning, like, I don't. Like, it's hard for me to make like a top 10 list of anything, because I'm always like, oh, well, this person should be included. Like, I always want everybody in the room, as many people as possible. I don't want it to be limited, because I think, like, I even get mad when people say like I did this for a year, and this is so crazy, but like, there were so many books that were like popular during their time that nobody reads anymore. Yeah. And I was like, well, how is that possible? Like, how did you,
like Pearl S. Buck has a Nobel Prize for literature. And who reads Pearl S. Buck anymore? I did. Because I was like, well, what am I, like, why aren't these works surviving? And then why are other works surviving? Like, what is that about? So I'm that kind of thorough, and I think that's why this book comes out in the way it does.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a limiting principle. I have a kind of expansive principle. And I think that it's not working through trauma as much as it's kind of just looking at, I think what makes me very proud about this book, and proud in a different way than the other books I've written, is that, like, I feel really confident about handing this to somebody young and saying, like, oh, here's the beginning of a conversation you're going to have for a long time. And I feel really good about a lot of the people that I've been pointing them in the direction of. I love that too. Like, I love giving people art and saying, oh my God, do you know about this person? Do you know this story of this person? Do you know what I mean? Like, I love that. So that's, I think, it's more of a spirit of generosity than kind of like, oh, I want to make the Out 100. Though if I made the Out 100, it would be a very different list. Even if I just wrote it, I would be like, let me tell you who the real Out 100 are.
Peter Thiel. 1 through 10.
That's right.
Were there any people that you discovered while you were in this book? I keep saying people. There's also books and musicals and movies, but I'm a people person. were there things that you discovered while writing this that you didn't know about that were particularly surprising to you?
Lady Jamba was a new person that I didn't know about, but I thought was a fascinating story.
Tell them about her.
So Lady Jamba was a African-American trans drag performer who, while performing at Red Fox's Club in LA, was arrested for indecency, and took her trial to court, and Red Fox and all these other performers defended her, and kind of flocked around this trans woman who was trying to fight for her right to be on a stage. And I thought that was really fascinating.
And Red Fox supported her picket of
absolutely,
his club.
yeah, supported her picket of his own club.
Who knew I had so much respect for
Red Fox, truly. So that she was somebody really fascinating. There were a lot of fascinating kind of connections of different people that I didn't quite know. But I hate to say it, I knew a lot.
I knew all of them.
I know a lot of shit. A lot of shit. Like, some of them I was like, I don't even need to check the dates. I know this, like, but it's also like, I see my prejudice. Like, why does Nathan Lane have a page and a half and Britney Spears has a parallel? Like, that's on the
So how does this sound? I would love to force you to read an entry and talk about it, then let you read whatever you want.
Yeah.
Then maybe take a few questions and then sign all these people's books.
Absolutely.
I want you to read your entry on the Compton's Cafeteria.
Oh, okay.
If you wouldn't mind.
All right. Compton's Cafeteria.
I have it right here.
Oh, you're so good. Oh, I thought I was gonna get in trouble too, because I'll read that. I tried to take the thought with writing these was to take you to the scenario itself. It's August 1966, and you're a transsexual sex worker on the corners of San Francisco. You're just trying to make a little dough in a world that won't even give you a chance. At the end of a long night, you and your friends go to Compton's, a small cafeteria in the Tenderloin. You go to a gay bar, but they don't let your kind around. Uptight butch queen fakeness. So you're just trying to grab a coffee and get out of these shoes for a fucking minute before you hit the streets again. And then Compton starts asking you for a service charge. And they don't want you loitering and scaring away all the hobo and drug addict traffic they're getting at 3 in the goddamn morning. So they call the popo on your ass. That's right, the cops. And that cop, that dirtbag cop says, get up. Because before you've even finished your cup of coffee that you paid for, thank you very much, and you finally had enough, so you hurl that shit right in his pig face. That's how the Compton riots of 1966 began, 3 years before a trans person started the Stonewall riots. Trans girls in San Francisco were standing up for themselves, and all the rest of us too. Before any of us knew it, these first recorded riots of trans people fighting police brutality signaled the beginning of the trans movement in San Francisco. Yeah, no, that was good. Well, because it's also like, I'm not a historian, so well, I'm gonna say the Compton riot. What am I just.
Well, why did that particular entry? Like, how did you decide to write that A in the second person and be like in a more like impressionistic voice than just like Compton riot?
It was just kind of because I wanted it to. I think what happens in a lot of like somebody reached out to me recently because they saw the book and they were really touched by the fact that even in the illustrations, like it's high and low, it's people interacting together, it's not austere. And that was really a very conscious effort in the book to be like, these are people just like you. These are people just making art, just like you. Making art with their friends, just like you. And it was done that way because I think what happens is like June's coming up and we're gonna be pushing this book every effing place you can. But it becomes that kind of like, this is circular, but this is just how my mind works. Like when I was a kid, I was the only kid in my class who really loved Black History Month because I was like, oh my God, finally we're gonna find out about people, like real people, rather than kind of austere historical people that you weren't in touch with. And I think that's even happens kind of in the gay history that we're getting right now. Like everybody's like these saints and these untouchable people. Martha B. Johnson was a homeless person for most of her life, who dealt with her own kind of addiction, who was a sex worker. She was not somebody that, I think I did include it actually, but there was a list published in the Village Voice of all the bars Marsha Johnson had been kicked out of because she'd been a little rowdy, like they were people. Sylvia Rivera is the same way. And now we kind of have this preciousness of like, oh, Saint Sylvia never did wrong or she didn't do. It's like, no, everybody was really complicated. Everybody like didn't get it right. I mean, one thing you learn if you read back certainly in gay literature, but like the death wish of like gays prior to like 1960 is profound. You have like great writers, even like Tennessee Williams writing things like, well, you can't really be gay over 30. And it's like, what are you talking about? He obviously changed his tune at a certain point, but it's like, you're dealing with everybody's trauma. And it gets better as we are more open and more aware. But like, I also think like, and I was having this conversation with an artist just a few nights ago. It's like, I think my whole generation's purpose is we're a bridge generation. We survived and we were witness to the AIDS crisis, but there was a huge gap of work that we're all still trying to make up for and capture in new ways and push forward. So a book like this and a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the work that I think my contemporaries do is legacy work, because we're trying to reinvent things that were lost to us for so long, So I feel like, I don't know if I answered your question at all. I don't remember what it was. Oh, good. Yeah, no, I'll take it. I'll take it that I did a great job. But yeah, no, I think it's really, it makes me feel like, it was very heartening to hear from somebody who had picked up the book and was like, oh, wow, it just makes it all feel, these people aren't austere to me. They're really close and friends. And I think that's certainly always part of my work, because that's how I think this sounds so pathetic and sad, but it's just true. Like, it's not that I didn't have friends when I was a little kid, but like, I thought Ava Gardner was better than any of these mooks that I was with. So like, she was my friend, And like in my house, like you'll see pictures of Oscar Wilde, and because those they're my artistic friends, they're my artistic family. And it always feels like you're in conversation with them and you're thinking ideas with them. You're not alone in the process of being artists. You're actually supported by all these people. And that's always been really prescient in my work. And I think that's part of where this is.
Well, let's hear some more of the book. Then.
All right, see, this is the best part. We'll open to a random page. We'll see what happens.
It's like Ouija radio.
It is. Wouldn't it be funny if people started telling fortunes by this? Like, I don't know, girl. You got Lady Bunny again. What's gonna happen?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. Ask a question. Ask a question. Here we go. All right, random. All right. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. Some of that doesn't get talked about enough. David B. Feinberg, 1956 to 1994. In the history of gays, there's always been that real snarky friend, the one sitting on the side with the best comments and the shadiest reads. It's a time-honored tradition of our people, and the line of this elevated snark was perhaps perfected in the works of David B. Feinberg. He was a wit and writer whose first novel, 86, debuted in 1989 and won the Lambda Literary Award for gay men's fiction. The fact that Feinberg wrote comedic novels during the height of the AIDS crisis might sound impossible, but he somehow made it work. He's a writer of such genuine insight and wit that the saddest part of his work is that there's just not more of it. His follow-up book, Queer and Loathing, All But Living with HIV, is as beautiful and funny as it is harrowing. As Feinberg wrote, why do I cry?
Because you're gay.
Because I'm gay, that's right. I was gonna post this on Instagram the other day, but it's true. I was actually thinking, I'm so gay that I thought about doing my kitchen in bad Streisand art. And there's a lot of that. You just have to go on eBay and be like, I painted a picture of Barbara Streisand. And be like, oh, you did. And I want it in my breakfast. It's just so bad. David Feinberg wrote, there's a part of me that knows I'll never die. There's a part of me that knows better. Incredible. All right, let's look. Turn. Oh, here we go. Paul Jabara, 1948 to 1992. The man behind disco hits like It's Raining Men for the Weather Girls. Jabara was a performer and personality that lit up the disco era with his great sense of play and camp. He got his start as a performer on Broadway in shows like Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar. Jabara fell in love with the dance beats of disco and found a knack for writing. He wrote the music for the infamous first disco musical and into a flop, Rachel Lily Rosenblum, which closed in previews. Jabara began writing for the young Donna Summer, and the two became friends. Jabara released his first solo album, Shut Out, which included a duet with Summers. He went on to release 3 more solo records and became a staple of On American Bandstand for his outrageous sense of fun. His biggest dance success came with the song Last Dance, written for Donna Summer to sing on the Thank God It's Friday movie soundtrack. The song went on to win the Oscar and the Golden Globe for Best Original Song. As the lights faded, so did Jabara. He died of complications from AIDS in 1992. Let's see. Everybody. I'm just looking because I'm like, oh, well, we've done a lot of those people who are dead. Here's because I love him and I just talked to him today. Drew Droege, 1977. Ask any gay comedian in the country who one of the funniest people in the world is, and the name Drew Droege will inevitably be on their lips. Droege is the rare combination of smarts and slapstick that all comes from his genuine power as an actor. Skilled in improv and trained at the Groundlings, Drew has appeared in film, television, and stage. He had a major breakthrough with his Chloe web series, where he impersonates an only slightly exaggerated version of the actress Chloe Sevigny. Droege continues to bring his work to audiences everywhere, most recently with his off-Broadway solo play, Bright Colors and Bold Patterns. He's actually coming back Pride Weekend to do his new show, Happy Birthday, Doug, and you should all see it. Here, because she almost got left out. Christine Jorgensen, 1926 to 1989. The grand dame of American transsexuals. Christine Jorgensen started it all. Jorgensen transitioned as an adult in the early 1950s. She traveled to Sweden to have her gender confirmation surgery, and when Jorgensen returned to America, she began a press tour to talk about her operation and the lives of transsexual people. Her arrival back in the States was front page news in the New York Daily News, but despite the tawdry way that she sometimes was treated in the press, Jorgensen always handled herself like the lady she was. Jorgensen began a nightclub career as an entertainer, releasing her memoir, Christine Jorgensen, a personal autobiography, which was a national bestseller and eventually made into a film in 1977. Geez, let's look. Oh, here. Carol Channing. You know the voice. Your friend does the impression. There's no one quite like Carol Channing, which is perhaps why she became so unforgettable. Channing was a Broadway legend, starring in shows like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The Vamp before her greatest hit, Hello, Dolly. It was this role that she would be most remembered for, and which she toured and revived multiple times. With her distinctly gravelly voice, big eyes, and bigger blonde hair, she was an object of fascination and imitation for the LGBTQ plus community from the beginning. Channing was a mainstay of 1970s variety television, which brought her quirky and endearing style to audiences around the country and the world. She left her audiences gay and straight, and they in turn showed the same kind of adoration to her to the very end. Raspberries. We should have put that in. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's 250,000 words. And it's kind of, I don't know, I really do say this because I'm very proud of it, in the fact that it gets a lot of people who I think get left out of the conversation a lot. You know, everybody kind of knows the great hits right now, where you talk about Harvey Milk and you talk about Marsha P. Johnson, but you don't talk about people like Jose Sarria, and you don't talk about people like Sarah Schulman, and you should. So I'll do two more, random. Ready? Tell me when to stop. All right. All right. Oh, here, John Cameron Mitchell. John Cameron Mitchell is an actor and auteur who wrote and created Hedwig and the Angry Inch. He wrote the iconic piece with Stephen Trask and starred not only in the original off-Broadway production in 1998, but also the film version in 2001, which he also directed. Mitchell continued his directing career with 2006 Short Bus, a sexually graphic and heartfelt movie about love and lust in New York. I always think of that movie and hepatitis for some reason. I don't know why I've connected them in my mind, but there we are. Mitchell has continued in 2010's Rabbit Hole, in 2018 How to Talk to Girls at Parties, both with Nicole Kidman. In 2015, Mitchell had another turn as Hedwig, replacing Neil Patrick Harris in The Revival and receiving a special Tony Award for his work. Mitchell is the host of the Manishing Party, a legendary party in New York, which features DJs Amber Martin and Ange DiCarlo. I gotta tell Ange she's in this book too. Mitchell's musical podcast, Anthem Homunculus, debuted in 2019 and stars Cynthia Erivo and Glenn Close. All right, one more. Harvey Feinstein. He truly doesn't get enough credit, but for a whole generation of theater-going people, Harvey Feinstein has been the gay voice of a generation. He began his career in downtown New York and plays with folks like Jackie Curtis and Andy Warhol. He started writing his own work, not shying away from the gay experience, but diving right into it. Feinstein wrote Tortoise on Trilogy, which became a huge hit on Broadway, winning him a Tony Award for Best Actor and Best Playwright. Feinstein also wrote the book for Jerry Herman's musical La Cage aux Folles, and in 1983, both shows were running concurrently. On top of all this treasure we have to thank him for, he also brought us Estelle Getty, who played his mother in Tortoise on Trilogy. Feinstein continues to work and charm his way into the hearts of America, whether as Mrs. Turnblatt in Hairspray or as the playwright of Kinky Boots. Yeah.
You want to take some questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll take any questions you got.
Does anybody have questions?
All right.
Who did the art and did you pick the things for them to draw?
So the artist is Freddie Wilde, and I had to read it because I just wanted to make sure I was getting it right. So Freddie is from Spain. So, and I don't say this to kind of rat out Freddie at all, but like we sent him the list of illustrations, and I had said, oh, you have to do an illustration about the movie, The Queen. And he sent us this beautiful picture of Queen Elizabeth. And I was like, different queen, too. So there was a little bit of a language barrier and a little bit of like, there's somebody else named Bobby Campbell rather than the Bobby Campbell that's in the book, who was an early AIDS activist that I felt like needed to be talked about. There was we had a lot of conversations about the art because I wanted that kind of quality of the art intermingling between two people. And a lot of the funnier, I will take credit for a lot of the funnier ideas about like, oh, we should put Edward Albee on a bottle of poppers. That was my idea. That was my idea. Yeah. But they really came up with a lot of brilliant things, and the illustrations are really beautiful, and I think they make a real impact on things, and I was very pleased with them, and again pleased that they kind of like on 232 Miss Richfield has Arthur Rimbaud in her little heart, so I liked that mixing, and I think that was always important, and certainly something that I tried to concentrate on too. So yeah, I helped. I didn't draw on anything, but I helped. Hi.
You talked about how you picked what is in the book, but how did you balance the entries between being strictly informative and putting your own spin and humor on the actual text?
Well, I think you had to get I wanted everybody to get basic facts of why they were included. But I think there was always a thing of like, well, there was a debate. There was a debate because I'm not a historian. So I could sit here and like, here, this is what happened to them and this is what they did. But I don't know that I would want to read that book of just me saying, and here's what Nathan Lane did today, So it was always it was always figuring out what that balance was, but wanting people to get like a sense of, oh, this is why this person was interesting. And then go out. Like, if this is the only gay book in your house, you have a lot of research to do. Like this is a great gateway to things, but it's not, you can't. Though I would love to see like some kid try to do a book report on this one. Then Barbette, Poppers, amazing. So yeah, it was always a balance, but I also kind of relied on more of knowing myself as a writer, knowing that I'm not a historian. So I tried to just get the highlights if I could. Anybody else?
Hi, I also saw To Build a Soul this last fall, which
Yes.
as a child in suburban Wisconsin, I identified with much of your story as
Oh,
well.
thank you so much.
I'm just curious, as you go through the spectrum of past and more contemporary creations, is there a qualitative difference between things that were sort of hidden in plain sight or artists that couldn't be as open in their subject matter versus, Hulu saying, oh, you seem gay, here are 17 things to watch that were made in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
At the risk of sounding curmudgeonly, I feel like the art was better when it was harder to tell the story,
Sure.
but I don't know that that's fair.
It's always fair, but it's always true. It's always true. The best Russian novels came out of the Tsarist period because they couldn't write. So you had to figure out how to be creative. It's always true for anybody. When you have to be creative, you think on your feet and you think of more interesting ways to tell stories. Always, and for everybody. I think it's true certainly of gay culture right now, because I think, it's that feeling you get It's that feeling you're gonna get in 2 weeks when your bank is like, oh, you're gay? Here is a pen. You're gonna be pandered to for a whole month and then forgot. July 1. I think that's what's happening and what will happen. I think what we all have to do and we all have to think about is what we as, what I like about queer culture is that it still feels organic in a way. Like you still know who those queens are when you go to a city, you know who the drag, I was listening to Race Chaser the other day, and Willem and Alaska were talking about like the queens that are in charge of different cities, who a lot of them have never been on Drag Race, but when you go to Chicago, you check in with that queen and this is a Philly queen, because we still operate on that way. And I think that gay queer art still has some of that organicness of like, oh, this is what we're responding to. This is what we're finding. And I hope that we keep that, because there's a whole other force that's trying to like just prescribe things to us. And to play on our own feelings. Like I watched Heartstopper. Did you watch that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, of course. We all did. And of course. When you're sitting on Grindr and you watch two attractive people fall in love, you're like, yeah, it's true somewhere. I don't know where. But I think there's also other stuff that is much more interesting it's not part of the conversation, but it should be the focus of our conversation. And I think that, I'm trying to say this in a thoughtful way rather than a mean way. But
Say it mean.
Say it mean. You're gonna be given a lot of shit and told that it's silver, and it isn't. It isn't. And the job that the legacy that I think gay people have and have always had, and we've forgotten, is that we're the arbiters of a whole class of art. We're even as an audience member, Fran Lebowitz talks about it in her first movie with Scorsese, where she says everybody talks about the artists that died in the AIDS crisis, but they don't talk about the audience that went to see those artists. That the audience was so informed, so on top of it. I mean, I see it when I saw a play of Charles Ludlam's, and the theater illusions were so profound, and about 5 of us in the audience got them because we were all like, we're those girls. Just biting the bubbles in the bathtub. But I think it is our job to remember that place, that you're an arbiter of great style. That is a legacy that's been passed on to you. That you as a queer person have always had to create your own style. So why not take it out and create something really fantastic? And I think that can inspire you, because rather than kind of, it's why the book was positive and why I wanted to concentrate, because I, like you, could be like, well, nobody knows what real glamour is anymore, and be mad about it, certainly. But I think there's also, look at the amazing things we have, and look at the amazing people that are still around and making work, and I'm forever grateful for those things, like I got asked recently for an interview about the book, and they said, you talk a lot about Drag Race, and I was like, because Drag Race is a big fucking deal. I mean, we take it for granted now because it's been on for a century. But like
Essentially just this year.
But like 15 years ago, to think that 9 drag queens would be on The View and it not be a joke, like to have them there interviewed for their work we wouldn't have thought that was possible. And it's a big part of the conversation, and it's informing kids, rightly or wrongly, about what drag should be. It's huge. It's huge. And that's also where this book really became hard, because everybody's coming out there's 10,000 new gay people every day.
Not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. It's not.
I have a question about arbitration. How did you decide who got the icon label that is peppered throughout the book?
And I have a follow-up question.
I'm sure. And why was this person not an icon? Yeah. Icons were people that were lauded by the group, but not necessarily part of the community. So kind of somebody that was embraced by it. That was my beginning. And who wasn't there?
Well, Ariana Grande was there, but
Yeah.
Kesha was not.
I think we all have a weird relationship with Kesha. No. But it was also that Kesha is a member of the. Kesha espouses to be a member of the community, creates art. So there was that kind of like, oh, okay, well.
But was there a criteria? I was whatever. But like, how did you delineate like what made an icon or what?
I think it was really people who, I mean, I kind of defaulted to a lot of people like, who are people talking about? Who are people that I walk into a gay person's house and like they have a Dolly Parton cozy, or they have, like that was who were those people that mattered to people? Who were, it was funny because I don't know if she's in the book actually, but like,
Don't look.
I know when I went to go see Shane and Dusty performed at Night of the House at Stevie's, and I was there, and people were, and I like Stevie Nicks, but like I'm not a Stevie by any stretch. There were a lot of women who were full Stevies. I was like, I'm just a casual Stevie Nicks fan. And even in my head, I was like, who would, if I had a night of anybody, who would it be? Judy. Well, Judy, sure. Sure, Judy. I have that. Yeah, that's true. But in my head at the moment, I was like, well, Diana Ross. But then I'm like, well, but there's only one Diana Ross. Like, I wouldn't even deign to wear the costume of Diana Ross, let alone pretend to be one of her. So I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of where it came from. And what it came out of. I think there's a lot more people. Somebody at the book company very casually was like, "Oh, are we doing a volume 2?" And I was like, "Are we?" Just because it's stressful.
When I lived in Wisconsin, I tried to organize a night of 1,000 Nikos, and we just didn't have those. Now see, I had exactly 2. But I still think it's a great idea.
Oh, I think it's fantastic.
And you could do a Nico lurch, like a zombie lurch.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Anyone, other questions?
Any other questions?
If people want more of you, where can they see you?
Well, I have a show. So we're doing a show at Joe's Pub on the 22nd of May. And we're going to be talking all about the book. I'm going to do some more of the gay BC's things that didn't make it into the book. So we're going to do a lot of that. And then I'm going to read from my new book called Faggot Blues, which my agent is very upset. It's like, how are you going to publish a book called Faggot Blues? And I was like, well, that's your job. I'm just writing it. That's your job.
A lot of asterisks.
That's right. Well, also, like I remember when I was reading Larry Kramer's book at Faggots on the subway, and I was like, oh my God, I'm reading Faggots on the subway. And at a certain point, I was like, yes, I'm reading Faggots on the subway. So I would often carry Faggots just to have it. I'm reading about faggots. Just right. Yeah. I was really reading like a book on Japan, but I was just faggots. So I'm glad to be joining that lineage of faggoty books.
I remember reading the book Cunt by Inga Muskie.
Oh.
I was too embarrassed, so I put masking tape over it. And I was like, well, this is the opposite of the entire point of this book.
Truly. Yeah, no, I love that.
I'm in Minnesota, and I'm reading Cunt on the bus.
Oh, see, we were just talking about that the other night too, because I was a closet Judy fan in high school. Because you say you're a Judy Garland fan, and people are like, where are you sucking dick? And I thought, but I just like, in high school, this might be too personal for us now. But I was I don't know what I was really. I dated women in high school.
You're a stud.
I was a stud.
You're a stud.
But I liked Judy Garland. So I would have under the front seat of my car, I would have Judy Garland, the double disc of Live at Carnegie Hall. And when I was driving by myself, I put it in. And when I was with other people, I put Ella Fitzgerald on. So,
Well, great,
you know, great cover. Great cover. But, you know, I felt like Ella was at least like, oh, Ella, they play her at coffee places, you know, like that, rather than Judy, you know. But yeah, oh yeah. I was almost outed, actually, because of that one time. This doctor that knew my family was like, oh, your son
I found a
listens
Judy
to...
Garland CD lodged in your son's appendix.
That's right. Right, it was that. No, but he came in and he was talking to me about, oh, he said, you're into jazz singers. I still am. And he said, oh, what about Judy Garland? And I was like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. And I was like, no, Judy Garland's not a jazz singer. He's like, well, she's a torch singer. Maybe. Like, I would not let up on the debate because I was like, I know what you're playing at, sir. And my mother doesn't need to know that for another 10 to 12 years, you know. So, yeah.
I love the book.
I thank you so
I love
much.
you.
I love you.
I love the
Let's hear Shane for Shane. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Get your book signed. Get the book.
That's right. Get your books.
Thank you both.
Thank
Love
you.
you.